Welcome to your Urban Connection. Remember, this is the channel that is often imitated, but is never duplicated. And one of the reasons why we're never duplicated, ladies and gentlemen, is because most people will not talk about the things that we talk about on this show. As I remind you, I am not a newscaster. I am a podcaster. And tonight, we're going to be no different than we are any other time on this show. We're going to talk about something that no one else is talking about. Now, earlier in the week, we all saw the Georgia District Attorney indict former President Donald Trump and 18 other people on criminal charges related to his efforts to overturn an election and interfere with an election. Some of those people were formally respected in their various positions and in their professions. One of those people, namely Rudy Giuliani, at one time was a well-respected mayor in one of our largest cities, New York. He is no longer respected by anybody as a lawyer, as a politician, and he's lost all respect that he had garnered as a former mayor. Now, some of the other people, like former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, and there are several others, a couple of attorneys in there, they were indicted, but all of these people have one thing in common. They all were indicted under the Rico Act. Now, the Rico Act is different than a regular indictment because the Rico Act carries with it a conspiracy to engage in a particular criminal act. Now, of all the 18 other individuals, I want to talk about two of those individuals that were charged under the Rico Act for their involvement in the attempt to interfere with and intimidate a witness, I'm sorry, not a witness, a person in Atlanta who was an election worker. Now, the two people I'm talking about, let me say this up front, I'm going to refer to probably throughout this program as lackeys, Lackeys. If you don't know the definition of that, Google it. And these two individuals are Black. They're Black lackeys. Now, what do I mean by that? These are two individuals, and I'm going to name them. The first one is Tivian Cuddy, that's Kutti, and the second one is Harrison Floyd. Now, let's talk about why I call these people lackeys. These two people are Black Republicans, conservative Black Republicans, who consider themselves loyal to one of the worst presidents in history, one of the biggest con men ever to enter the White House, and a man who has been twice impeached, 4 times now indicted, been convicted of rape, and these two lackeys put their life their freedom, their reputation, their credibility, their neck on the line to engage themselves in this conspiracy that has led to an indictment under the Rico Act, all for Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump. They wanted to prove their loyalty to former President Donald Trump, who is, as of this date, has shown no loyalty to anyone else. Now, let me get into this. What did they do? First of all, let's talk about Mr. Floyd, Harrison Floyd. Harrison Floyd was the director of so-called Blacks for Trump. And I'm sure you've seen him at various Trump rallies. And Trump always manages to have this guy with his signs and a few other blacks around him pretending to be Blacks for Trump. Now, there's not very many of them. But you have to wonder, how is it that they always appear right behind the stage that Donald Trump is performing on, okay, at his rallies? Is that coincidental? I don't think so. So anyhow, Mr. Floyd, once President Trump had singled out the black election worker, Ms. Ruby Freeman of Atlanta, singled her out, targeted her, made disparaging remarks about her, lied about her, and then was followed up by Mr. Giuliani, spreading those same lies, making derogatory remarks about Mrs. Freeman and her daughter, claiming that they were hiding votes, changing votes, passing along vials that he referred to as cocaine. And all this was lies. But Mr. Floyd bought into those lies in an attempt to appease Mr. Giuliani and Mr. Trump. Now, I don't need to remind you that over 60 judges and 60 lawsuits filed by Mr. Trump, none of which provided any, not 1 ounce, not 1 iota of evidence that there was anything faulty about the election, that Mr. Trump fairly and squarely lost that election in 2020 to Joe Biden. So anyhow, Mr. Floyd takes it upon himself to get involved and the contacts Ms. Ruby Freeman in Atlanta. Now, he lives in Maryland. So he makes an attempt to contact her. And he can't make the contact through telephone. So then he reaches out to a fellow Black conservative lackey, Ms. Trevian Cuddy, and engages her help in contacting Ms. Ruby Freeman in a false attempt to claim that she was there to help Mrs. Freeman. But that help would only come on one condition. And that condition was that Mrs. Ruby Freeman had to admit to the false accusation that she engaged in illegal voting activity. Ms. Cuddy would only help her if she would admit to being guilty of that charge to which no evidence has ever been supplied to prove that charge and that allegation. Ms. Ruby Freeman and her daughter have steadfastly denied any involvement in anything illegal during the 2020 election process in the state of Georgia. None of it. Yet, Mrs. Cuddy, who, by the way, is a former publicist for Kanye West and for R. Kelly, Mrs. Cuddy took it upon herself, and I'm probably sure with the support of Mr. Floyd, she took it upon herself to leave her home in Chicago and go to Atlanta, Georgia, to have a face-to-face contact or meeting with Miss Ruby Freeman. Now, Miss Freeman is no dummy, okay? And she was uncomfortable in talking with a stranger, and a stranger who was telling her that she had 48 hours. She had 48 hours to do something, or otherwise her freedom was going to be in danger. Now, she said she couldn't tell her what the danger was, but she had 48 hours, and she was there to help her. She was there to help her get out of the city. But that help would only come on one condition. She had to admit that she engaged in an illegal activity involving the voting process in Atlanta. She refused to do so and advised Ms. Cuddy that she would only meet with her at the police substation, in which Ms. Cuddy agreed to. However, when they had the meeting, it was in front of a police officer who was wearing a body cam. Now, the body cam recorded the conversation between Mrs. Cuddy and Mrs. Ruby Freeman. And you could clearly hear Ms. Cuddy on the body cam video and audio suggesting that she was there. She was sent by somebody higher up, some higher official who she did not or would not name, but she was there to help. Now, to everybody involved, ladies and gentlemen, this seems like this was an attempt by Ms. Cuddy to kidnap Mrs. Freeman, and who knows where she would have ended up. Now, here's the problem that I have. If you're from Chicago, and there's plenty of things that you could do to make things better in the state of Illinois, and in particular, Chicago, Illinois. So why would you take it upon yourself to leave your home and go to Atlanta to involve in something that does not even concern you? Was this done in an attempt to prove your loyalty to Mr. Trump? I hope not. Mr. Floyd, I don't understand what your involvement was, sir. Why you decided to get involved in this? You reside in Baltimore, Maryland. Has Mr. Trump ever done anything for the state of Maryland? Done anything for the Black people in the state of Maryland? Not that I know of. I'll tell you what he did do. He compared your state of Maryland and your city of Baltimore to what he called some derogatory names related to certain African countries. And I'll tell you another thing that he did, Mr. Floyd. He talked about your late Congressman, Elijah Cummings, like he had a tail, and called him everything but a son of God. He talked about him and talked down to him and on him at every opportunity that he had. But you, ensuring your loyalty, you want to be accepted by Mr. Trump and by Mr. Giuliani. So you and Ms. Cuddy would throw this black woman election worker, you would attempt anyhow to throw her under the bus to, like I said, appease Mr. Giuliani and Mr. Trump. This is why you deserve the title of lackey. That's exactly what you are. That's exactly the way you behave. You too are the type of people that would throw your mama under the bus to get validation from Donald Trump or Rudy Giuliani. Now, I ask you a question. Now that you find yourself indicted under the Rico Act, which comes, if you're found guilty, comes with a prison sentence of 5 to 20 years. And it is not pardonable. So nobody can pardon you from this. So I'm going to ask you a question. Is Mr. Giuliani going to help foot your hefty, large legal fees? Are they going to provide you with an attorney? Mr. Giuliani certainly is not, because Mr. Giuliani is trying to raise money to pay his own legal fees. Is Donald Trump going to pay your legal fees? Is Donald Trump going to hire you an attorney? Because I'm going to tell you, these attorneys don't come cheap. It's not out of character for an attorney bill to range anywhere between $100,000 and $500,000 to be your representative in one of these cases. Did you ever think about that before you decided to become a lackey? Before you decided to meddle in the affairs that did not concern you? Or were you only concerned with throwing this innocent black woman under the bus, denigrating her name, supporting the lies that were spread by Mr. Giuliani and Mr. Trump on this black woman? You know, after all, Mr. Giuliani has now admitted that everything he said about these two women, Ms. Freeman and her daughter, was a lie. Now, why am I not surprised by that? Because Mr. Giuliani was doing what the hell he could do to appease Mr. Trump, to stay in his good graces, even though Mr. Trump has refused to pay him for his legal work that he performed. Now, that's real loyalty for you. So if you think that Mr. Trump is going to be returning the loyalty that you showed to him, to you, you've got another thing coming. All you have to do is ask Mr. Giuliani, okay? All you have to do is ask about probably 100 other people. Ask the other 16 defendants that are charged and indicted in this RICO, most of whom worked for Mr. Trump, and he showed no loyalty to any of them. Why in the hell do you think he would show loyalty to you? Why do you think that he would pay for attorneys and pay your legal bills? After all, it was reported that Mr. Trump himself up to this point has paid over $27 million in legal bills. And that was even before the latest indictment on Rico charges by Atlanta District Attorney Fannie Willis. That was before. So Mr. Trump, he's a billionaire. He can afford it. After all, he's spending other people's money. But can you, Mr. Floyd, and can you, Miss Cuddy, can you afford it? Can you afford to spend the next 5 to 20 years of your life behind bars because you choose to be a lackey for Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani? You choose to put your credibility, your reputation, and possibly your freedom, along with your neck, all on the chopping block, just to be accepted into Donald Trump's world. Man, you know what? You people are some of the dumbest people that I have ever encountered. I never thought I'd see the day that two Black lackeys, conservative Republican lackeys, would go to this length to win the support of someone because of his financial status. You know, even Katrina Pearson had more sense than that. Katrina Pearson did not involve herself in supporting Mr. Trump's big lies, his denigration of a woman who was doing her job and did it well for many years. She did not get involved in the outing, the targeting, the threatening of this woman by Mr. Trump and his surrogates. But you two did. I only hope, that you have learned a lesson, but it might be too late. Because Ms. Willis has documentation, she has evidence to prove the guilt of both of you. And you know what? I hope you spend time behind bars and see how many times Mr. Giuliani or Mr. Trump will show any sympathy to you, because I sure won't. Okay? So, with that being said, I'm out.